I, on behalf of Maharashtra Animal and Fishery Sciences University, and on behalf of KNP College of Veterinary Science, Shirwar, Associate Dean of KNP College of Veterinary Science, Shirwar, Dr. Dhumal sir, and co-chairman of this webinar series, Dr. Muglikar sir, welcome you over here, sir. We are very happy that you are part of our webinar series. I welcome you all. Now it is over to you, sir, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Live
thank
streaming
you.
going on, sir.
Hello?
I can see even live streaming on Facebook also, sir.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. That's fine. So thank you very much, all of you. I can see my friend Dr. Kurkure there, Dr. Vital was there, Dr. Dushant is there, and other officers of the university. This is my first webinar, technical webinar. I have been quite versed with the lectures and other things I had. Many of them, Dr. Kurkure knows it. And this is probably a great chance for me. I was looking for such an opportunity. And the topic which has been assigned to me is cytology. It is indeed an honor to speak on cytology today. And before I start, I may say that cytology is a vast topic. It can be divided into many things. It can be divided into basics. It can be divided into oncologic cytology, non-neoplastic, and many more. And probably system-wise cytology can also be covered. But today, to start with, I will be talking about some basics of cytology today. Can this screen sharing is disabled by the host?
Sir, now you can share, sir. Please see.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. So the topic today, as I said, is principles, procedures, and interpretations in cytology. This is something which many people are not aware of. And that's why I thought I would start with the basics. There are many simple things which probably people are not knowing, and I'll take those one by one. So if you start defining diagnostic cytology, it's really a big field. And there are many definitions which could be there. One of the simplest would be to evaluate the cells in order to diagnose disease or look into the lesion or find a cause. Before we delve further, probably we would like to look at one of the two oldest 17th century microscopes, because microscope has been a favorite with me. When you ask me what are my two favorites, one is microscope, other students. So you can see those primitive microscopes there. And this is probably the first picture which has been taken by, first commercial pictures which have been taken from a cytology specimen. There are trichomonas here. And with the show. He said the disease occurs at the cell level. And then the British surgeon, Sir James Paget, applied first FNAC.
जब मान लिया 7,000 की तो कोई दिक्कत नहीं। अरे जहाँ भी नहीं कर लेंगे अगर
धायगुडे सर सगळ्यांना म्यूट करा.
अरे नहीं ये तो जीप लालच दिया वजह से मैं जाना ही बंद कर दिया इनके। इसके भाई का फोन आ रहा था अब अरे तेरा वो सोच रखा हमने तेरे बारे में कुछ और आज ही ये जीप देख ले तेरा वो पक्का होने में मैं टिकट आ गया
सर सगळ्यांना म्यूट करा.
वो तो अलग पर्सनल दोस्त था
पर्सनल दोस्त
100 रुपए रोज देती हो ठीक है नहीं तो बार बार लगा दूंगा ये जेठ बजे ये बात ना सुनाया कर अब उसकी उम्र में मैंने कर दिया था उसकी उम्र में मैंने कर दिया था प्रतिभा पाटिल जी से अपन जो बस चलो मत करे मेरे तो मेरे भी जानने वाले मैं तो कहता हूं मैं चलो कहां जाऊंगा मेरा तो
मैं ऐसा कहना बोल रहा था किसी जाने में तो मुझे बता दे और तो बता दे किसी जाने
क्या है थे अब तुझसे तू भी करियो
उसकी क्या लड़ियो जाकर वो आए थे
हेलो सूद सर. हेलो हेलो सर. हेलो सर. हेलो सूद सर. हेलो हेलो सर.
Hello.
Yes sir, now you are audible sir.
Okay,
Please
okay, all right, all right. Okay. Okay. So, can you see the screen also?
Yes sir, yes sir.
There was a lot of disturbance in between. I don't know what
Yes.
happened. And
Yes.
anyhow, it doesn't matter. So we start over again. And so the cytology was strengthened later on. And with the introduction of fine needle aspiration cytology, this is one technique which has really revolutionized cytology because you can pick up not only the superficial lesions, but also the deep lesions with the help of ultrasound or CT scan or MRI. Well, one person whom I would say the father of cytology is Dr. Pepny Cloud. Interestingly, he was not an American, but later on, like all Indians migrate to America, he had interest in oceanography, and later on he developed interest in cytology, and he became a real pioneer. And this is one of the earliest publications on the vaginal smears. And this pap smear technique has been in place till today. And in Western world, every year, every post-menopausal woman has to undergo this test. And this has tremendously reduced by more than 90% the incidence of cervical cancer. This simple method, it's really a record-breaking thing. And I want to show you another picture of Dr. Pepny Cloud, his microscope and slide, and this is really a fascinating picture. And another pioneer in cytology who brought the cytology further on is Leopold Koss. So he developed this Bethesda system of classification of cervical tumors. So before we go further, let us look at the basics of cytology. Why we see the cytology as a pioneering science. Look, the cell is the base. So we have at the basic level cell which constitute to form the muscle, then the heart, then the organ system, cardiovascular system, and then the whole organism. This is true for any animal species or humans. And if you look on this side, there's a biosphere, there's a ecosystem, there are all kind of organisms, including animals. So if something happens to the biosphere, probably the things are going to move on to the cell, there will be damage to the cell, and that is a fundamental unit or a central unit of the body. And beyond that, we have also gone, we look at the cellular organelles, we look at the molecules, we look at the chemicals, we look at the metabolics, we look at the biochemicals, all those things. Well, that's the difference. What is the difference between histology and cytology? Here there is histopathology or histology. Here you see that it's a very organized thing. It's a 3D dimensional organization or a spatial arrangement. You have the cells, you have the stroma, you have a basement membrane, and there is a typical organization by way of which you can recognize a tissue. It's easy. But look at the cells. In cytology, we are looking only at the cells, not this organization. This is missing. That's why cytology requires much more time and is much more difficult to pathology. And this is a picture. Here you can see the histology, and this is a cancer. This is a squamous cell carcinoma, and here you can see the cytology of the same. So the cytology is difficult due to subjectivity. Every subject who will look at the cytology will have a different diagnosis. I'll come back to that later on. Heterogeneity. There are so many kind of cells, more kind of cells than more kind of tissues. So in each tissue, let us say in lungs, there are so many kind of cells. There are pneumocytes, there are bronchial epithelial cells, there are cartilage, there are so many things. Capillaries, everything. So non-uniformity, and there are a lot of differences. When the cells react, they become quite different. And what we are doing, we are poking in a small needle, which is somewhere between 22 to 25 gauge in a big mass. So we have a very narrow collection of sample, narrow range of action. That makes cytology certainly different than histopathology. In fact, if you look at cytology and histopathology, for certain tumors, cytology is certainly a gold standard. I would say for most round cell tumors, except for some variants of histiocytic proliferations or histiocytic tumors, others can be very easily recognized. Let me tell you an example, PVT. PVT is so simple to recognize by cytology, and the diagnosis is almost unequivocal. Similarly, the lymph node smear is quite readable on cytology. Bone marrow, cytology much better than histology. I had experience of looking at the bone marrows of rats, rabbits, dogs, and cattle. Fluid, it is very good in fluids. Infectious agents, you can see much better infectious agents in cytology. Maybe I can quote some examples later on. Vaginal cytology has been typically overemphasized, as I told you. Ultrasonography fits well into cytology. But histopathology has so far been considered as a gold standard for diagnosis of several diseases, particularly, let us say, tuberculosis or granulomatous diseases or many of the cancers. You can have the advantage of using histochemistry. You can have the advantage of using immunohistochemistry. Of course, you can use that in cytology, but it's not that easy. I had an experience of working with the immunocytochemistry, but it was not that easy. It's really difficult to do because there is so much contamination of blood, fluids, and cell shrink. There are many problems. There is no architecture. In histology, there's an architecture. So you can also grade the tumor much better in histology. You can also determine the invasion of the basement membrane, invasion of the adjacent tissues, connective tissue, invasion of the blood vessels, invasion and embolization of the lymph vessels, even perineural invasions, all those things which predict malignancy, they can be much better done in histopathology because there is no architecture, so invasion cannot be determined in cytology. So what are the principles of diagnostic cytology? I showed you the histology. So you should always be aware of the normal histology. Unless you are not aware of histology, you cannot do cytology, because cytology is just a reflection of histology. So whatever you see, whatever kind of cell, suppose a cell is a round cell, it will remain a round cell. Suppose a cell is an elongated cell, it will remain elongated. Suppose it's a spindle cell, it will remain as a spindle cell. Suppose it has more cytoplasm, it will have more cytoplasm. For example, a squamous epithelial cell is a big one, has a lot of cytoplasm, it will remain big on cytology. So if you take cytology sample from, let us say, pancreas, so you must know what is exocrine pancreas, what is endocrine pancreas, what are the duct cells. Similarly, if you want to take it from the liver, you should know whether it is hepatocytes or the duct cells, because there can be tumors of both. Always in cytology, first examine, don't jump to 100x, just examine at a low magnification. That helps. And I may tell you here a very important thing, that with experience, when you see at the low power, you come to know which field has to be examined. You don't have to examine every field. You know where are the cells at low magnification. You can focus there at 40x or 100x. And you have to always examine intact cells which have intact nucleus. If the cells are enucleated, probably the nuclei swell, the chromatin appears coarse, and this gives you a false feeling of a neoplasia. And of course, in cytology, there is something more than that, that is imagination. And certainly it's a practice. If you practice something for 10,000 hours, probably you learn about that something. And you also be familiar with the stain precipitates and the artifacts. This is a very important issue which many people ignore when they are sending samples. It may be just a stain precipitate and they may be saying it is anaplasma sitting over an RBC. I'm going to show you the common things, common flaws that usually we find in cytology. When you have too thick a cytology smear, it's highly contaminated with blood. and there are cells. I can't see those cells. If you ask me an opinion, how can I give my opinion, or anybody can give an opinion on this? This is too thick. Probably it has not been spread properly. Now, this is some contaminant. This is probably a lubricant material or a gel. This is not a parasite. This is a fiber, which could be a synthetic fiber or cotton fiber. Very common flaw in cytology is when you are dislodging the cells from the needle onto the slide. If you do it from a distance, what you are going to land up, that you are going to make 100 spots on single slide, and those small spots, they will dry up and they will be too thick, you can't see. This is the higher magnification, you can't see anything there. And another thing, that certain samples have very little shelf life. For example, urine, CSF, you have to examine it within 1 or 2 hours. If you delay the examination of a urine cytology, what will happen? You will find this kind of picture. There will be a lightening of the cytoplasm. There will be unnecessary processes coming out of the cells. Cells start degenerating. And similarly, sometimes there is a contamination on the slide. There is a contamination on into the blood. Supposing you keep blood longer, supposing you keep the sample longer, there is a tube contamination, or there can be even contamination in the stains. And those contaminants may be mistaken for some etiological agents. Another very important flaw in cytology is, can you see here, this crushing effect. When you crush the 2 slides, I tell my students and everyone that cells are live, they are tender, they are fragile. So handle them with care while making a smear. Just handle them with like individuals. Don't force slides like this. Don't pressurize. Don't crush. If you crush, then you pull apart the nuclei and you will see only threads. Won't see the nuclei. This is blood powder. These are no cells. Many people ask me, what is these cells? These are no cells. This is just blood powder. This is again a gel. And this is a stain deposit. This is also a stain deposit. Another thing, there is a difference between an alcohol fixed and air dried smear. If you do a Romanowski, you are tuned to do the Romanowski staining, and you try to compare it with ACHI, there will be a lot of differences. So always, I would say prefer Romanowski or the Papni cloud stains for cytology rather than ACHI. So here you can see alcohol fixed sample. The nuclei are nicely done, but the cytoplasmic details are much better in air-dried Romanowski stains. And another thing I would like to stretch here is that if you have no cover slip and if you have a cover slip, there is a difference. If you have a cover slip over there, the quality is different, and if you don't have, it's blood. Particularly when you keep the slides and examine it later, there is a lot of dust onto the slides and it is very hard to remove that and the image gets blurred. Advantages of diagnostic cytology. It is a very simple technique, as I'll try to show you. Speed, it's very quick. It's an on-table technique, means the patient is in clinic and you can give the diagnosis very quickly, maybe within hours. I have seen some situations where high-ups, some very known VIPs coming and giving a diagnosis in 2 hours. they are still sitting with someone and they go happy. So that is the advantage of cytology. Safety. It is very safe for the patient. It is also very comfortable for the person who is doing it. And it's a very cost-effective technique. You really don't require so much of paraphernalia, equipment, etc. I'll show you just simple things. And the accuracy is somewhere between 60 to say 100%, depending upon what you are looking at. Advantages over histopathology. Cytology can be easily obtained preoperatively without general anesthesia and even without sedation. So it's an almost non-invasive procedure. And it's also very economical. Doesn't require you need a syringe, you need a needle, little bit antiseptic and few slides. That's all. And stains. Stains already available in a lab. And the results I told you are quite rapid. For recognizing certain agents like bacteria, fungi, parasites, viral inclusions, protozoa, the cytology is certainly better than histology, because here these organisms are much better delineated because they have full-scale expansion or spread. The spread is better and you can see the morphology much better than histology, because histology is a rigorous process through chemicals. I already stretched upon this. This is what you require. But the success would depend upon the appropriateness of the sample. The sample has to be properly taken. If the sample is not appropriate, let us say there is a bleedy lesion and you collect the blood out of that, which is, let us say, TVT lesion and blood is flowing out, or serosanguinous fluidus, and you just are scared and keep the slide down and put a drop there, and then you try to see, probably you are losing the real picture. The procedure of sample collection always would be very important what you choose. Sometimes aspiration is good, but at other times non-aspiration may be better than aspiration, and sometimes impression smear may be better than aspiration. So all that depends upon whether it is a naked lesion, ulcerated lesion, something is, if it is a dry lesion, probably a tape smear or a scraping would be much better. Slide preparation also is very important. How you prepare your slides. Supposing there is a liquid specimen like CSF or urine and you don't concentrate it, what you'll find there. And similarly, if it is a very thick exudate, you don't need to dilute it. So you need to do according to the situation. You have to be witty there. And very important thing here is the clinical pathology communication. This is what I learned when I served in the diagnostic lab for more than 10, 11 years, rather about 12 years I worked there. So I had more friends in medicine, surgery, gynae than in pathology, because I was daily conversing with them. I was getting an input from them. I was asking them, because they write just a lump, you know, a mass. What I know about this mass, whether it is from a dog or it is from a kettle or it is from a cat, I don't know. And where it is located, how long it has been there, how it looks, which breed is this, all that matters. And certainly it's a very expert science. The experience and expertise is essential for a cytologist. More the experience, easier it is. According to one data, those who are experts in cytology, they would focus somewhere else than those who are inexperienced. They will focus on unwanted areas. Cytology collection. So some confusion about imprint and impression. I would say they are the same. They are touch smears. Okay. Some people say they are different. So either you can touch the slide onto a lesion, or you can pick up a tissue piece which has been done by excisional or incisional biopsy, and you can smear it onto the slide in a sequential manner. Why the sequential smears there? That's a question. See, here we have the thickest part, here we have the thinnest. So here there may be chance of more contamination and fluid, and here there may be more cell because we are working towards the gravity. And here we are working against the gravity. Less chances of contamination here than here. Scrapings. So blunt edge of the scalpel, you do the scraping of a lesion and then slowly spread it onto the slide. There, you can also do this tape smear. This is good for certain dermatophytes, including the Malassezia, which is the yeast. And you can also do that for parasites, particularly when the lesions are dry. Then this is a preferred technique, and fungal infections as well. Swab. Where the area is sensitive or it is little deep, you can design your swab length. For example, if you want to go to the deeper area of the nostril, you can poke in a swab. For example, you want to go into the ear, you can again poke in a swab. Okay. For example, you want to go into pharynx, oropharynx, you can have a swab. You want to go into vagina, you can have a swab. You have a sinus, you have a fistula, you can have a swab. You can also have a swab from the rectum. And sometimes when the lesions are dry, you can moisten your swab with sterile saline, because if you don't have a sterile saline, what will happen? Many unwanted microorganisms which are already there, they may be confusing as etiologies. And probably you may need to isolate. For that, sterile swab is better. And always prepare the smear by gently rolling over the slide. No side-to-side motion, I'm showing you that. So here. So you have to just roll this swab onto the slide very gently. Not like this. This to and fro motion is not to be there. That is going to spoil your cells. I told you, cells are tender, fragile. Handle them with care. And this is another way. Supposing there is a more fluid sample, then you can do a needle spread or a starfish like. What happens there? When you just go with the help of needle like this, so towards the periphery, you have concentration of cells than center, because cells will be pulled apart by the force of the needle. Another technique which I already specified is fine needle aspiration. That has been really a revolution. For either superficial masses, proliferative lumps and bumps, you will do this technique as a preferential technique where particularly it is not ulcerated or it is covered by the skin. And you can also go into the deeper areas with the help of ultrasound. You can go into liver, you can go into kidney, you can go. We have been able to diagnose so many tumors of the spleen, liver, peritoneal cavity, and ovaries, and many more by doing this technique, even lungs. In contrary to the normal belief that if you have a bigger bore needle, let us say 18 gauge or 16 gauge, there will be better cytology. It should be a very small gauge needle. That should be about 22 to 23 gauge. That is better. And the size of the syringe would depend upon how much negative pressure you want. Supposing it's a semi-solid lesion or a flesh-like lesion, we don't need that much pressure. In contrast, if we have a very solid hard lesion, we need much more pressure. So probably you need a 20 ml syringe. So there's no hard and fast rule there. Fine needle aspiration can be done with the help of some these devices have been there which are better in applying the pressure, negative pressure. You can do it manually also. And the simple technique is that hold the mass with your left hand or with one hand if you are a right-hander, and poke yourself the needle, because if somebody else holds, you don't know whether he's holding that lymph node or just holding a fat in his hand. So once you are holding yourself, you know that you are truly holding the lesion. And then insert the needle and apply, there is no air in the syringe, apply negative pressure, and while removing, you go in different directions. It takes only a few seconds, and now you release this piston and remove the needle, reattach the needle, and put the pressure, and as close to the slide as possible, discharge the material. Don't spray it from a distance. I showed you the flaws there already. This is a non-aspiration technique. It's like a stab into the lesion. Just you can have a needle and stab into the lesion. And this is another. Here, you are already having air in the syringe and stabbing into the lesion. Where it is good, where you find that there is a lot of blood, or let us say there is a fluid, there is a cyst, or there is an abscess. There, in that situation, probably it is better to go for a non-aspiration technique. Non-aspiration here would save you unnecessarily contamination with the blood, with the fluid, with the pus. Rather, it will cut through the tissue, whatever solid tissue is there, and pick up the cells. What we want, not the contaminated. We don't need contaminants. We need the real cells. That's the issue. So this I already stressed. One of the best technique is a squash smear. In a squash smear, what you do, you take the material on the slide, put another slide there, and just move it like this and remove. There's nothing crushing like this. Just put a slide slowly, move it, remove it. 2 smears, one on the donor slide, other on the recipient slide. So this is generally a preferred method for semi-solid material that we are getting in most cases. From the fluid samples, such as body cavity, pleural effusion, pericardial, peritoneal, cerebrospinal fluid, urine, joint fluid, cysts, and various type of washes, you need to centrifuge most of the times, not always. Sometimes the fluid is too thick, peritoneal fluid, you may need dilution as well. But most of the times, these fluids, particularly urine, you always need a centrifugation. But rarely you also don't need centrifugation there. And preferably use a vial which is containing EDTA because there may be fibrinogen there which may clot, and once the clots are formed, the cells are entangled there and you can't see the cells. And it's better to make the smears right there and then rather than waiting for smear making. Smear making is a very simple process. Somebody asked me what you should do in the blood first. I would say if you collect the blood, first do a smear, the rest you can delay. So make the smear immediately. If you are in a field, probably you can take 1 drop of blood from an animal and then you can see. Similarly, I told you that urine and CSF are quite sensitive regarding their shelf life. So you have to make the smears within 1 to 2 hours. But for certain other fluids, you can delay it, particularly refrigerated material, up to 24 hours or 40 to 48 hours regarding stains in cytology. See this word Roman Nauskai, that's how I remember it, Romanowski stains. They are used for dried smears. So these stains are all based upon eosin and methylene blue. They have eosin and methylene blue in different ratios and in different media. Either those are in alcohol or they are in aqueous medium. For example, Wright stain, Leishman stain are made in alcoholic medium. That's why we don't need any pre-fixation. Whereas Giemsa is the aqueous medium, so you need a pre-fixation in methanol there. Another combination stains are really wonderful. See, in most of Americans, they are using Wright stain, but Wright Giemsa is preferred in Europe. Leishman in our lab has been later on. When we started, we were using Wright Giemsa, but then we got a firm who was supplying Leishman ready-made. So we started doing any stain is good, I tell you, but you have to standardize. This Maid-Grunwald Giemsa is also excellent for cytoplasmic granules or cytoplasmic details. This gives wonderful staining, particularly for cytoplasmic components. Bichrome stains like Etchi, if there's nothing available, I would say you should do Etchi. I remember when initially I started looking at the smears which were stained by Etchi in from the lymphomas, it was hard to recognize because cells appear much smaller. They don't appear that pleomorphic. And the cytoplasm is not at all clear. Trichrome stains are excellent stains, which includes Papini cloud, Sanos triple, but problems there. That you have to wet fix the smear in ethanol. You have to, and how much time it remains wet, you know, when you are making a smear, it dries off quite quickly at the summer heat of 40. Diff-Quick. That's a very simplified procedure in which you have eosin and methylene blue in different bottles and dip first in alcohol, then in eosin, then methylene blue, and then in water, and you are ready within 2-3 minutes, 2 minutes, the slide is ready. But the quality is certainly, it's a screening method, I would say, better. There have been a lot of controversy whether we should use Papini cloud or Romanowski. look at the advantages of Romanowsky stain and look at the advantages of Papniklau. Papniklau's nuclear details are good, but rest of the details, in fact, cytoplasmic details are also good in Romanowsky. In Papniklau, mostly the nuclear details are better. So I think the Romanowsky stains are more versatile. They have to be preferred. And veterinary cytologists are preferring those too. Well, when you try to diagnose a condition, the first question would be whether it's an inflammation or not an inflammation. If it is non-inflammation, is it a neoplasia or non-neoplasia? And if it is a neoplasia, is it a cancer malignancy? That's the prime question in the mind of a clinician. Whether it is a cancer or non-cancer. But remember, all non-inflammatory exudates, they may be compounded by inflammation. There can be always inflammation overriding there. And among the inflammatory cells, the most common, I would say neutrophil constitute about 75 or 80% of the diagnosis. Then eosinophils, macrophages, lymphocytes. I'll go one by one a little bit about them. And first we'll talk about the neoplasia or the malignancy. That's more important in cytology rather than inflammation. That's where the cytology has all over the years focused. So there can be either general criteria, there can be nuclear criteria, there can be cytoplasmic criteria, or there can be structural criteria. General means what is overall appearance of the cells, whether they are in clusters or they are in sheets or they are individualized. Nuclear criteria, that's very important in cancer cytology. Cytoplasmic criteria have some value. Structural criteria, very little, because you can't see that structure. Sometimes you have indirect evidence. For example, a secretory material may be there in the background. For example, if it is some glandular tumor, you may find a secretory material down there. For example, histiocytoma, there is some secretory material. For example, chondrosarcoma, osteosarcoma, there is a background material. So let us try to look at the criteria of malignancy one by one. The first thing is pleomorphism. First thing is cellularity. See, cancers, they arise from single cell. Cancers are monoclonal in origin. So if there is a preponderance of one cell type in any material that you see on the slide, think of a cancer, as simple. Second thing is, within that lineage, there will be much more variation than normal. Let us say a normal squamous epithelial cell turnover and a cancer turnover, you will see all those asynchronous, lot of variations among the cells. So that's cellularity and pleomorphism. So there will be nuclear pleomorphism, there will be cellular pleomorphism. And nuclear pleomorphism is better seen. So there is anisocytosis, means the cells are not equally sized. Normally, for a cell type, let us say for a hepatocyte, there is a limit of expansion or contraction or size. But if it is beyond that, probably you think of a cancer. Macrocytosis. Some cells can be too big. For example, there are certain people who say that in a urine, if you find a very big cell, it may indicate a urothelial carcinoma. Just one cell. So big cells, unusually big cells, they would indicate cancer. Cytoplasmic basophilia. Normally, most of the cells, they have eosinophilic cytoplasm, except for secretory cells, neurons, hepatocytes, which have basophilia, variable basophilia. And that is because of the ribosomes or pyroninophilia, what you call. But even those cells which have normally eosinophilic cytoplasm, when there is a cancer, they start showing that basophilic cytoplasm in contrast. There can be abnormal cytoplasmic inclusions. What you normally don't see, that you will find. Some cells which are not phagocytic, they become phagocytic. Aberrant phagocytosis. And the phagocytic cells, they may become non-phagocytic. There may be hemosiderin in abnormal cancer cells, which is not to be seen in normal cells. Atypical vacuolization. The cells which are not vacuolated may appear vacuolated. The cells which had vacuoles may tremendously lose their vacuolization. High nuclear to cytoplasmic ratio. So nucleus as compared to the cytoplasm becomes bigger. Nucleus, where is the bug of cancer? That is in the nucleus. So nucleus shows tremendous changes, including megakaryosis, variable ratio. Normally, for a particular lineage of cells, there is a limit of cytoplasmic and nuclear ratio. There is a range. Beyond that range, some cells may have a very little cytoplasm. Let us say squamous cell carcinoma. They have a ratio of, let us say, 1:4 to 1:8 or 10 cytoplasm as compared to nucleus. But in cancer, it may be 1:2. Let us look at the nuclear criteria. Anisokaryosis, unequal sized nuclei. So I told you the crux of the story is in the nucleus. So you are looking at the nuclear variation, megakaryosis or macrokaryosis, big nuclei, multiple nuclei. Many a times you find giant cells, particularly the single cell tumors like those of the mesenchyme origin, let us say chondrosarcoma, osteosarcoma, let us say rhabdomyosarcoma, leiomyosarcoma, fibrosarcoma, all have giant cells, hemangiosarcoma. So if you have giant cells there, that is a very good corroborative evidence. See, there is a main evidence in the court, and then there is a side evidence. Now you know all this because of the recent history of crimes in India. So you have one evidence followed by another evidence. For example, my name, I give this example to my students. For example, my name is Naresh. There are many Nareshes. If I attach the Dr. Naresh, probably I narrow down. If I say Naresh Kumar and then I attach Sood also doctor, probably I am limiting myself and say Gudavasu, then I am alone. So this is how you are adding one evidence after the other and narrowing down your scale of evidence. Abnormal nuclear shapes, that's another thing. Normally, for a given cell type, there is a range of nuclear shape. Most of the round cells or hematopoietic cells have a round nucleus. Most of the epithelial cells have a round nucleus. Most of the spindle cells or connective tissue cells have elongated or spindle-shaped nucleus. But what happens? Let us say there is a fibrosarcoma, you have the rounding of the nucleus. And nuclear membrane also gets more thickened and irregularly thickened. Similarly, chromatin becomes very coarse. There are irregular chromatin patterns. There is a hyperchromasia. It appears much dark nucleus. when they ask me, sometimes they bring the slide and I see it's too blue. I say there are a lot of cells, there are a lot of nuclei because it's blue. Blue represents nucleus. Similarly, there are variations in the reaction of the nucleus. High mitotic index. What is mitotic index? When you count the number of mitotic figures at 40x and make an average. And that is what is mitotic index. So usually you don't see, even in highly proliferating cells, you don't see mitotic figures. Why? Because the phase that we see in the mitosis is M phase. We don't see G1, G2S phases of the cell cycle, where the cells are priming to divide. So we are looking at a short time only when we see that condensation of chromatin going to the two poles of the spindle. So you see those mitotic figures. There can be abnormal, there can be abnormal mitosis. There can be nuclear molding. There can be, even in cells where there is a single nucleolus, for example, hepatocyte, you may find multiple nucleoli in a cancer. Unusually larger nucleoli, abnormally or sharp-edged nucleoli, angular nucleoli, and isonucleolosis. Within one cell, you may have 3, 4, 5 nucleoli, and they are all unequal, unequal shaped, unequal sized. So this picture may explain a little bit. So you have cancer in proportionate number of one lineage of cells. You have unusually large variable sized nuclei. You have much lesser cytoplasm as compared there. You have a lot of variations in shape and size, variation or pleomorphism. You have loss of cell surface modifications like cilia or like microvilli. There is a total disorganization of cells in a three-dimensional. They form irregular clusters. That's what you see in cytology. Instead, if you take from a normal gland, there will be a monolayer or single cells or single group of cells, just one layer. But here there will be polylayer, they will be moving in all directions. Poorly defined boundaries, particularly in cervical smears, you look for that. And here, this explains histology, although it is histology. This is explaining the variations in the cells. Can you see? I told you cytology is just a reflection of histology. Can you see those nuclei? They are so variably colored. They are so different from each other. Their sizes are different. Their shapes are different. And even their reaction is different. And there's an abnormal mitosis. Can you see that? 3-pole of a spindle. Usually there should be 2 poles. So that will create unstable genotype, because what you will get aneuploidy. And that probably helps in clonal expansion of the cancer. And look at these cells, they are quite different. They are high, this is highly deeply stained as compared to, let us say, this one. And see, the nuclear membranes are very irregular. Contours are, so the key here is, this is a nice representation. If something looks bad, probably it is going to behave bad. So these cells really look bad, and these people really look bad. Probably that is what is representing the cancer. So if you remember, the word cancer represents a crab. and malignance represents a bad behavior. So now let us try to look at the basics of cancer, how we try to divide the cancer on cytologic basis. There are 4 types of cell lineages that we see. The first one is the round cell tumors, which are arising from mostly hematopoietic tissues, which includes lymphocytes, which includes plasma cell tumors, which includes mast cell tumors, which includes histiocytic tumors, and PVT, of course. So here you can see nice TVT, see round nuclei. They can be either plasma cell-like or they can be more lymphoid cell-like. And they have a fine vacuoles. And in TVT, there is usually one nucleolus. In lymphoma, there are multiple nucleoli. In TVT, there is just one nucleolus. That's the differentiating point. And TVT is usually contaminated with pus. You find neutrophils. Epithelial cells. Epithelial cells, as you know, they have tight junctions. They are bound to the basement membrane and each other. So they will be seen as tightly bound clusters, even glandular epithelium. And epithelial cells have a lot of variation in their size and shape and nucleus to cytoplasm ratio. So if you look at these squamous epithelial cells and those squamous epithelial cells and probably these cells, they look totally different, but they are of similar origin. And that's the beauty. So epithelial cells, they show a lot of anisocytosis, but still they remain conjoined. For example, here. Mesenchymal tumors. See, there are elongated nuclei or oval nuclei there, and the cells are spindle shaped, have long elongated processes. This is what is a general picture of a mesenchymal tumor. But this is a variation. This is an adipocyte, which is also a mesenchymal origin. Fourth category, so I have said round cell tumors are best diagnosed. The turnover in round cell tumors or the retrieval rate is very good and the diagnosis is excellent. But for epithelial tumors, diagnosis is pretty good, but not as good as round cell tumors. For the mesenchymal tumors, the diagnosis is about 60 to 70%. And for melanocytic tumors, if there is a melanin, they have been put into a different category because in cytology, melanocytic tumors may resemble epithelial tumors, they may resemble round cell tumors, even they can resemble mesenchymal tumors. And if it were a non-melanotic tumor, means there is no melanin there in most of the cells, you can't recognize. If you have melanin, it's easy. For example, here. But here it's difficult. Here, if you see these cells, except these two, if I delete these 2-3 cells, probably I focus here, it will be very difficult to say. I'll say it's a basal cell tumor. See, this is a picture which shows the progression of cancer step by step. There is a normal, there is a dysplasia, there is a moderate dysplasia, there is a severe dysplasia, and there is a carcinoma in situ right from here to here. And look, cytology is also getting some difference. See, from here to here to here and here. This is a bigger 3-dimensional in all direction cluster. So key is when epithelial cells, they form a spatial cluster in all directions, haphazard or palisadings, probably we think about a full-fledged cancer. And it's really difficult to diagnose at these stages and differentiate between these stages during cytology. And in urine, we get a lot of problems. In peritoneal fluid, we get a lot of problems. Another thing with pathologists is, I learned that, probably you also agree, Dr. Vittal and Dr. Purpure is here. They can agree. I can see those two faces. There may be many more. I can't see their faces because I want to see my own. So these pathologists, they are three pathologists. And this man says that these two guys are hopeless because they don't learn to agree. This is a common thing. So always take opinion from 2-3 people if it is a difficult case. This is in human cytology and human oncology. That's why they have teams now in hospitals. And probably we'll have to think about that in the coming days. And I'm giving you that practical example. We call it as kappa value. So there can be somewhere in between 0 to 1 is the scale. And if it is beyond 0.75, it is excellent correlation. If it is between 0.5 to 7.75, it's good. If it is less than, it is fair. Least is poor. Here it is poor. This is between pathologists. It has been seen, this is a published data, that if 3 to 4 pathologists are looking at the same slide, which is difficult one, probably there is a chance of 30 to 40% error or disagreement. Now, this is normal. Here, most people will agree that there's no dysplasia, it's normal. People will agree. When it becomes an invasive carcinoma, it's a full-fledged cancer already breaching of the basement membrane, connective tissue, and maybe onto the blood vessels and inside the blood vessel emboli or into the nerve. It is very easy. It's very easy to say invasive carcinoma. Adjoining areas are involved. But once it is a dysplasia, it's difficult. Early dysplasias were very difficult to diagnose, so it becomes fair. So that's the key. Difficulties are there in cytology. So we have talked a little bit about the neoplastic conditions. How much time I have taken? So non-neoplastic fractions, which include cysts, hyperplasias, and mainly the inflammation. So this is an example of an epidermal inclusion cyst. And when you try to aspirate from there, you will find the superficial keratin, keratinizing epithelial cells, because when you are penetrating through this area, you will pick up this only. And this is a sebaceous gland cyst, sebaceous gland hyperplasia. So you are just picking, maybe it is oozing out, sebum is oozing, and you can see those nice, and this is the histology. And you can see those nice sebaceous gland cells. But see, there is not big nucleus, there are no much irregularities there. That is why it is hyperplasia. One of the differences that people ask me is how to differentiate between a hematoma and a fresh hemorrhage. When there is a fresh hemorrhage, usually there will be platelets. Can you see that? There are platelets. But when it is an old hemorrhage, there will be macrophages and sometimes neutrophils coming into play. And those macrophages may have hemosiderin or hematoidin in them, or erythrophagocytosis. So that is how you differentiate between hematoma is usually seen more often in the pendulous ear dogs, those breeds. That's a very common entity. And also the color would change. If it is a fresh hemorrhage, the color is bright red or pink red. But as it gets older, because of the breakdown of the hemoglobin into its components, into hematoid, hemosiderin, etc., you will get a different color. It will go rusty color.
हॅलो,
Hello,
मी नाही फोन केला, चुकून लागला सर.
hello. Inflammatory lesions. So I told you that neutrophils, they are the key. If you learn about blood neutrophils, you learn about 50% of hematology, I tell you. And similarly, most of the times in inflammatory exudate, you are looking at the neutrophils. And if there are more than 90% neutrophils, that is an active process. It could be due to necrosis or the bacteria, pyogenic bacteria. It can be immune mediated sometimes. But there is a significance always. If you find 1 or 2 eosinophil along with neutrophils, it doesn't matter, say 1-2%. But once they get to about 20% or 15%, then you think about a parasite or an immune mediated or allergic or a fungal etiology. Pyogranulomas represent usually a foreign body of the fungal, and here again the number of macrophages matters. If the macrophages are more than 20%, that's important. If they are 5%, because along with neutrophils, some macrophages will always be there. But if they are significant, the degree of significance is very important. Just finding one cell and saying that this is this, no. You have to look at the significance of those cells. Granuloma represents an aggregate of macrophages or their derivatives like epithelioid cells or the giant cells. So once you have more than 50% macrophages, you think about a granuloma. And it could be either fungal or foreign body or a chronic disease. And chronicity is not only defined by macrophages. Remember, the neutrophils will arrive at the site within minutes. And the macrophages, they will arrive at the site within hours. Okay, maybe 3 hours they will be there. But what about lymphocytes? Lymphocytes will take 1-2 weeks to come there. And particularly their derivatives like lymphoblasts and plasma cells. So as the lesion gets older, you find more lymphoid cells. So lymphocytes, in addition to being indicative of immune mediated etiology, they are also indicating the chronicity of the lesion. If you want to age the TB lesions, probably lymphocytes, T4 cells play a key role. Another thing to be seen in neutrophils is whether those are intact neutrophils or degenerate neutrophils. If you have degenerate neutrophils, means their swollen nuclei or their cells are swollen, they have fragmented nuclei, and in addition, they have engulfed bacteria like this. You can see they have engulfed bacteria. So that indicates a sepsis. We call it as a sepsis. Okay. And this is pretty common in peritoneal fluids, in lungs, in the pericardium, let us say TRP case. And I tell you, if you can recognize this morphology of the bacteria within the cell, if you can say it is a cocci or bacilli, cocci are mostly gram positive, bacilli are mostly gram negative. Remember that formula. So if you are able to see the morphology and recognize the bacterium, you can say, yes, this is 100% the etiology. There is no better way, because once you have taken out the neutrophils and fixed them, they are no more phagocytic. So in vivo phagocytosis indicates a true etiology. I tell you, no isolation matches it. No bacterial isolation would match it. That is the key. Because if you try let us say from the, even from the lungs, or let us say from the trachea, or let us say from the lower, or let us say from any other tract, if you try to isolate, you will isolate huge number of bacteria, particularly at the postmortem samples. Why? Because there are so many contaminants coming into play when you are using your knife and you are opening up the carcass. So once you see these neutrophils with bacteria or etiology is there, that's a better proof than any isolation, any Koch's postulate. But you see, most bacteria would stain with the Romanowsky stains, except for mycobacteria. They rather appear in the macrophages, mostly seen in the macrophages, epithelioid cells or giant cells, and they will see as translucent structures. So this is just an example, pyoderma. There is a clubbing of hair because of the pus oozing out, and you find neutrophils and see neutrophils degenerate and the bacteria engulfed. Look at that. There are staphylococci. Staphylococcus is a very common bacterial infection of the skin. It's the most common. Deep and superficial pyoderma is mostly caused by staphylococcus. This is an actinomycete group, actinomycosis, that's affecting the heart tissue. And can you see the granules in the pus? The mycosis granules are bigger than actinobacillosis. They are about 1 millimeter and they can be seen with the naked eye, whereas the actinobacillosis, they are much smaller. They can't be seen with the naked eye, but the pus is creamish in both, and you see this kind of bacteria. That's a broadly actinomycete group, which includes actinomyces, actinobacillus, and nocardia. So you have elongated, thin, filamentous organisms with granulated appearance. That indicates actinomycete group. This is a chronic osteomyelitis. Look here, there is a eroding of the bone in many places on X-ray. And when we took an aspirate, see, these are the osteoblasts, and these are the macrophages. There are a large number of macrophages. I told you they indicate chronicity. And this is the real-time histology picture. Can you see that chronic inflammation eroding the bone and entering into the bone marrow? And this is superficial inflammation. And this is a chronic active inflammation. When chronic active means acute plus chronic. So this is acute inflammation when there are neutrophils, but when there are significant number of macrophages, say about 15%, then that becomes a chronic active inflammation. It has been going on for a much longer period than acute inflammation. Basically now, the inflammation is no more acute, subacute, chronic. It's acute or chronic. That's what is the recent classification. And you can see here, there are neutrophils, there are macrophages, and there's a giant. So that suggests a fungal etiology or a foreign body. These are the eosinophils, although the granules are not, they are dog eosinophils. Dog eosinophils have big granules, variable pleomorphic granules. This is not blood, mind it, this is cytology. The cells would appear different in cytology than blood. They are not as fine. This is a flea allergy. In fact, this was flea allergy dermatitis from where this has been taken. And this is sheep. Can you see those sheep eosinophils are different? Eosinophil is a fascinating cell. We can talk about that eosinophil for about half an hour or 1 hour separately when time permits. So you can see those fine granules, lot of eosinophils in the skin scraping from the sheep, probably a allergic inflammation, hypersensitivity, or parasite there. Parasitic diseases can be diagnosed with the help of cytology. I am not going into that because that makes mycotic diseases can also be hypersensitivity or allergy. Let us talk a little bit about the organ system cytology, not too much. I told Dr. Whittle initially also that we can't cover too much. I'll take another 10 minutes or 5-10 minutes, not more than that. I told you the ultrasound guided, you have a transducer of the ultrasound and probably you are contaminating your material with the gel and you find those precipitates there I showed you. And you are guiding your needle to the area wherever, maybe to the liver here or maybe to the a mass in the peritoneum. Ear swab cytology, we did 2-3 pieces on the ear swab, cytology. Malassezia is one of the common agents, along with, you know, the keratinizing epithelial cells. Recently, some of people were trained in other countries, so transtracheal wash or bronchoalveolar lavage. I was associated with 4 or 5 theses on this with the medicine people. And this is another technique which probably we can talk at detail at length in another lecture. Endometrial cytology, that's another area we can discuss. So these are the endometrial cells. They are different. See, they are more or less cuboidal cells lining the. And nasal swab cytology, nasal swab, you may get squamous epithelial cells, superficial, and you may get the degenerate and fibrin. See, there is a lot of fibrin. Fibrin always represents a severe or harsh injury. Remember it, because why? Fibrinogen is a macromolecule in the blood. It will leak only when there is a significant endothelial damage. And that is only to be caused by a harsh agent, not by a mild agent. So whenever there is fibrin, it indicates an alarm. Body fluids, you can have fluid from the pericardial, you can have from the pleural effusions, you can have CSF, you can have ascitic fluid, and peritoneal fluid cytology is a beautiful cytology. That's another lecture which I would be very happy when I invited for that maybe. So wherever. And this is a cluster of mesothelial cells. This is a reactive cluster, remind it, it's not mesothelioma. Because this kind of reactive mesothelial proliferations are pretty common in prolonged or protracted peritonitis. Urinary cytology is another fascinating cytology, difficult to do. I told you why urine keeping quality is very little, just a few hours. So this is unstained, this is stained. After staining, can you see neutrophils with big nuclei? They are mostly neutrophils, remember, and they are degenerate neutrophils. And these are the urothelial cells too. And there are rectal cytology is another area. And see, there are a whole lot of bacteria. There are thick, thin, big, long, small, round, and bacilli. All kind of bacteria that's in feces. Feces is full of bacteria. And there are 10 raised to power 11 bacteria in the rectum. That's a storehouse of bacteria. So when you are looking at a cytology sample, the decisions that you have to take, whether it's an inflammation, it's a acute or a combination, or a chronic inflammation, I told you these are, or it's a granulomatous inflammation or a pyogranulomatous inflammation. It can also be a chronic active inflammation, combination of the two I told you. When you're looking at a neoplasia, you are trying to define whether it's a round cell tumor or a epithelial or a mesenchymal or even a melanocytic tumor. Those are the 4 variants. So utilization of cytopathology is for definitive diagnosis now. It's not just hypothetical, it's for a definitive diagnosis. Helps in diagnosis and taking a treatment decision. And it's for determining etiology, it's better than histology, I tell you. As a screening tool, it has been highly successful in women by doing that pap staining, and can be used in dogs probably as a screening tool for the prostate or maybe other. As a follow-up of diseases, You can't do an invasive thing on a cancer repeatedly. Maybe the secondary swelling has been due to inflammation rather than the proliferation or reoccurrence of the cancer. So just do a needle prick and try to see what is happening there. You can use additional stains, for example, Ziehl-Neelsen stain. We did that in bronchoalveolar lavage, urine, and other impression smears, and we were able to see those, demonstrate those acid-fast bacilli indicating tuberculosis. You can also do PAS or Groppot or gridless stain for the fungal hyphae. You can also exploit immunocytochemistry. I tell you, immunocytochemistry is much more difficult than immunohistochemistry. I told you that. Because of a lot of contamination and because of no architecture, it's much more difficult. We had a try on that, and maybe I can show some pictures later on. There are diagnostic pitfalls in cytology, and those pitfalls are mainly due to poor collection. When the containers are not, they are contaminated, fixatives are not used, then if we don't use EDTA or other fixatives, there can also be due to poor fixation or poor drying. See, each and every step, right from collection, making a smear, drying it, fixing it, staining it, examining it, putting a cover slip, all matters. Fine steps. So all steps in a cascade, they have to be wonderfully rhythmic. Inflammatory changes, they sometimes appear like, particularly when there are macrophages, reactive macrophages, or reactive fibroblasts, reactive endothelial cells. They appear like cancer cells. Sometimes atypical changes related to hemorrhage, infarction, necrosis, that may also confuse with neoplasia or mimic neoplasia. So these changes can lead you either to a false positive or a false negative diagnosis on cytology. There is a final word before we go off, probably 1-2 more slides. This is a final word. The presence of a pathologist or cytopathologist at the time of taking a material FNAC or any other, particularly a guided FNAC, is highly recommended and saves a lot of effort and money in making a procedure diagnostic and cost effective. That's why in many hospitals and in even veterinary institutions, they have the pathologist along. Utilizing the science of cytopathology, as I showed, is cost effective, fast, simple, and accurate. And with the recent advances, technical advances, and cell block, see, there can be many ancillary techniques which can be added. Probably I skipped that slide. One of that could be cell blocks. So when you take the cell centrifuge and make a block out of it, that's what is cell block technique. We had a hand at that. They now show that cytology can replace as a gold standard. It's not necessary to must have the tissue to make an accurate diagnosis. It's not necessary always. That is why they call FNAC as fine needle aspiration biopsy also. So cytology is certainly not easy. It requires time, it needs experience, particularly in difficult cases. Sometimes it may be 1-2 hours of sitting. Let us say there are 10 slides provided. So you have to look at all these slides. Maybe in the first slide you get a diagnosis. Maybe in 9 slides you have nothing. In the 10th slide, you have everything. Maybe in a nook or corner of the 10th slide, you may have a group of cells which represents neoplasia. Finally, this is no smiley. This is no smiley. This is just a smiley cell. It's a reactive peritoneal or mesothelial cell with 2 nuclei, and see that corona, radiating corona on the periphery, which is seen in the reactive cells. So cells are smiling, and hope you are too smiling. And I'm really happy that you have given me this chance. I was looking for something like that. And I'm very much thankful to the organizers. Again, to those who have been in communication and those who have been sitting behind. I am thankful to all. And I'm thankful to all the listeners who had the patience to listen to me for more than, I think, 1 hour, 20 minutes or so. And this has been a great morning, and wish you a good luck in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any questions? If there are any questions, briefly I can take up.
Yes, sir. Actually, we have noted down questions which were posted by participants on chat. And I again request participants, if they have any questions, you please drop your questions in the chat box. Okay. So I have taken a few questions. Shall I ask questions, sir, on behalf of participants?
Sure.
Actually, there are many, senior pathologists also in the meeting, and I offer my thanks to them also. Dr. Joshi sir is there, and Dr. Karampal Singh, Ivera head, is also here in the group, and many other pathologists. So, sir, first question is...
May I take this opportunity to thank all my very esteemed colleagues and friends who are there to listen to me. I'm really grateful.
Thank you, sir.
You can continue.
So, sir, first question is from Dr. Gauri Chandrate. She has asked how to differentiate between lymphoid hyperplasia and benign lymphoid neoplasm based on cytology.
I think this question is basically wrong because there is no benign lymphoid neoplasm. Previously, it was known as lymphosarcoma, then it became a malignant lymphoma. Now they say it's lymphoma, that means it's malignant. That's probably, I think I answered that question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now, next question is from Dr. Joshi, sir, M.V. Joshi. Does cytological diagnosis need confirmation by histopathology every time?
No, I would say no, not at all. I tell you instances. It's my practical experience. We had seen a case and we diagnosed it as a mast cell tumor. They send it for histology, they say it is TBT. Why? Because mast cell granules, they go off while processing through HE. A lot of tedious processing there, and you don't have mast cell granules there. And then the owner is confused. So certain round cell tumors, I think cytology, I already emphasized that. That's a gold standard. And in many instances, this is now going to replace, because you can't tease the cancer too much. If you try to tease a cancer too often with biopsy, probably you are landing up a cell shower into the circulation and inviting metastasis, widespread metastasis, which is the key to killing it.
Okay, sir.
I think I...
So, I think you have cleared the question. Next question is, nowadays people have started doing visceral organ biopsy with use of various imaging techniques, maybe like ultrasound guided biopsy or so. So what special care is needed to be taken while doing these guided biopsies of visceral organs like liver or maybe kidney or any other like pancreas or other?
Yeah. Yeah, the first thing is you have to look at the organ you are talking about. For example, kidney biopsy is not as safe as liver biopsy. For example, if there is a peritoneal mass, it would be very easy to take FNAC. Okay, so you have to, there can be undue bleeding in a pancreas. Probably there can also be a bleeding in kidney. Also, there is a chance of always bleeding. So you have to be cautious and you have to go into the right area. Okay, I tell you that I have been looking at the liver cytology for a long time now. This is my experience. For 8 long years, I didn't find any hepatocellular tumor. And in the 9th year, once they had experience, I started finding hepatocellular carcinomas and bile duct carcinomas. Why? Because they learned how to take it. So yeah, that is, so safety, of course, you have to decide depending upon mass, what adjacent structures you are going through, how the needle is going to penetrate there, what on passage, are there any sensitive areas, all that has to be decided.
Thank you, sir. Another question is from Rishabh Gupta. He has asked, can you please explain what is nuclear molding and its significance? Nuclear molding.
See, yeah, nuclear molding, I'm going to talk. When the cells are proliferating fast, their nuclear membranes are irregular. At certain points, they are weak. At other points, they are thick. So what happens? Then when you are making a cytology smear, they are likely to turn on their axis. That is what is nuclear molding. And that significance is certainly there added in on a scale when you try to assess a tumor, like the Gleason scale or something.
Okay, sir. Last question, sir. This is from 2 participants, Dr. Pankaj Goswami and Dr. Margi Patel. Is it possible to differentiate invasive and non-invasive tumors based on the cytology?
No. The answer is simple, no. It's because you don't see basement membrane, you don't see blood vessels, you don't see lymphatics, you don't see the nerves, you don't see the emboli, you don't see the thrombi. So invasion how? Of course, there can be sometimes rare instances when some evidence may be there.
Okay, sir. I think because of time constraint, we cannot take up questions. But you can always approach Dr. Sood, sir. He is there on IOP group and he is available on Facebook and WhatsApp also. You can all ask him anytime. He is always free to share his views. So now I will hand over this screen to Dr. Muglikar, sir. Muglikar, sir, please.
So thank you, Sood sir, for your excellent and informative and very much elaborative webinar, sir, today. Again, we are thankful to you for being here for such a long period of time. And now the next speaker is waiting for almost half an hour. So I asked the next speaker, Dr. Bhagwat, sir, to please join this webinar series and please deliver the second webinar in this series.
Muglikar, sir, hello. Sood, sir, hello. Dr. Sood.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Please stop sharing your screen.
I already stopped it.
Yes. Now you stop. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Be with us, sir, till we finish this webinar today.
I'm there.
We will be happy to have a presence of eminent personalities like you, sir.
No, sir. No, thank you, sir.
So now I specially request our another guest speaker, Dr. Prabhakar Bhagwat, sir. He is a professor and a director, and he is from Himachal Pradesh. I request Prashant Pawar, sir, to briefly introduce Dr. Bhagwat, sir, before he delivers his lecture.
Hello, I'm audible, sir?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Muglikar, sir, I'm introducing the Dr. Bhagwat sir. Professor Dr. Bhagwat sir is a founding director of School of Pharmacy and Dean International Studies at Maharaja Agrasen University, Baddi, Himachal Pradesh. He done his UG, PG in pharmacy from Nagpur University and PhD from Dr. Hari Kaur Vishwavidyalaya Sagar from Central University of Madhya Pradesh. He has worked as a training and placement officers in the university. He has coordinating industry as well as institute licensing officers. He has also coordinating CSIR, DRDO, and various pharmaceutical